webinars allow you to hold practice sessions, which can be useful to let you and your co-hosts and your panelists practice and plan your presentation together, and also to get up to speed on the Zoom controls before you have to do everything live for your attendees. To start a practice session, you'll want to sign into the Zoom web portal and click Webinars. From here, you can schedule a webinar, as we saw how to do earlier, or you can click an existing webinar. And over here by Webinar Options, make sure Enable Practice Session is checked. If it isn't, you can click Edit this webinar and make sure to turn that option on and save it. Now, once practice sessions are enabled, anytime you want to practice, you can start up the Zoom desktop app. Now, if it's the day of the webinar, you'll see the webinar listed here on the right-hand side, or you can just come over here to Meetings, and you'll see your webinar listed here. And we can click Start. I'm just going to turn off my microphone and my camera for this, although if we were practicing for real, I would have them both on. Now, as the host, we'll see this banner at the top of the meeting window letting us know that we're in practice mode and that attendees can't join until we click Broadcast. But at this point, anyone you've invited as a panelist can also join the practice session, and you'll be able to interact and present as if this were the actual webinar, just without any attendees. But while we're in here, I do want to take a moment to talk about the roles in a webinar. So just like in a Zoom meeting, you'll have a host, and you can only have one host. Now, you can invite others to be co-hosts in a webinar, and that can be useful if you need help managing the attendees, stopping or starting the recording of the webinar, and so on. But you can't actually assign co-hosts until you're in the meeting. So co-hosts will have to initially join as attendees. So I'm going to click Broadcast to make the meeting live. That way, a non-panelist can join the practice session. Going live during a practice session doesn't affect the actual webinar schedule start time, though. All right, so at this point, if I come down here, I can see that under attendees, Jess and Nick have both joined. But we can't see or hear them because they're attendees. But here in the participant panels, when I roll over their names and click More, notice I can promote them to panelists. But there isn't an option here to make them co-hosts. In order to be co-hosts, they have to be panelists first. So I'll make both Nick and Jess panelists. And they'll see indications on their screen that they're now panelists. Oops, let me unmute Jess there, and I'll select Jess as a panelist as well. And you can see they're both now listed here under the Panelist tab. And I'm just going to leave their microphones and cameras off in this case, but you can see that we do have the ability now to enable them. But now let's say I want to assign Jess to be the co-host. I can roll over her name, click the More button, and choose Make a Co-host. And we can see that designation next to her name now. So co-hosts and panelists are similar, but co-hosts have a few more abilities in the meetings than panelists do. Both can start and stop their own video if you've enabled video for the panelists. Both can share their screens or view and respond to the Q&A panel. But co-hosts can also start the broadcast, start polls, and manage the status of attendees. Think of panelists as presenters along with you as the host on the stage, while co-hosts can also perform behind-the-scenes work to manage the webinar. Now, speaking of the Q&A panel, let's see what happens if someone types a question during the webinar. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to make Nick a regular attendee again so he can get access to the Q&A panel as an attendee. All right, so I see that a badge number has appeared here over the Q&A button. I can open up the panel by clicking that. And I can see Nick has asked, what are the plans for the company retreat? Now, the host, the co-host, or the panelists can choose to either answer live or type out their answer. If you choose Answer Live, that means you'll answer the question verbally over the microphone, talking to all of the attendees. Or you or your co-host or panelist can type to reply to the question. Notice I can send this to Nick privately, or I can leave that unchecked so that everybody can see the answer. Questions that have been answered will be moved to the Answer tab, where people can clearly read the question and the answer. Okay, so that's a look at how to work with webinars in Zoom. And there